Good morning. I'm Dave Graber, president of the National Nudist Research Library. We're here in Cypress Cove. You can see some of our books behind us. It's December 16th. I'm sitting here with Dean Hadley, who is the owner of Cypress Cove, and we're going to have a little discussion about his life in nudism. Good morning, Dean. How are you?
Good morning, Dave.
I thought maybe we'd start out with is your mom and dad started Cypress Cove,
Right.
1960s.
64.
64. And I was wondering if you could tell us some about them and the early days of their nudism and starting the Cove.
Okay. Basically, they got started in nudism in the 1949 when I was not yet 2.
Mm-hmm.
And at the old Sunny Palms Lodge down in Florida City, south of Miami,
Mm-hmm.
Homestead area. And immediately fell in love with the whole concept, and basically I have to say it has a lot to do with, I almost grew up in Sunny Palms essentially. On weekends, and but Sunny Palms was owned by an absentee owner, Reed Suplee, who owned Sunny Rest, and so they had hired managers, ran the place, and that caused a bit of problem. My dad wound up being a sort of an agent for the owner, the head of what they called an advisory committee that acted as liaison between the current managers
Mm-hmm.
and the owners. Getting that involved in Sunny Palms, he had an idea that he just needed to have his own place someday.
Mm-hmm.
And really their intention was that at some time, much later in their lives, when they were ready to slow down, maybe even retire or whatever, do his own thing. As it happened, they were vacationing in Central Florida in 1962 and stumbled upon an ad, real estate ad, for a piece of property that that just sounds too good to be true. And they drove down here and looked at it and said, that's where we're going to build our club. And made arrangements to buy it. I was still in Miami at the time. Had loaned, with neighbors and everything for a few days. They came home and said, we're moving to Kissimmee, and I had never even heard of Kissimmee at that point. But anyway, so we got started, and basically just a campground on the lakefront. And I honestly can't say exactly what my dad's ultimate vision was at that point, because I do believe it's kind of evolved over the years. He was looking forward to what can we do next. He never had in his mind that the place was done.
Well, and that's good because we have a beautiful place here.
Yeah.
Do you have some memories of the resort in the early days as it grew? Something give you a little bit of history of how it grew in that?
Yeah. That original property was 60 acres, of which almost a third was lake. We did not own the entire lake at that time. About a third of it was orange grove, and the other third was a few acres of swampland, some cypress or pine, I guess you could say grove sort of area, just sort of pine scrub. But there was the lakefront area, which was cleared off, had a small mobile home sitting there. It had been kind of a vacation place for the previous owner, and that was the seed.
Mm-hmm.
And so started off dropping in a few group electric and water services that people could sort of cluster their tents around and get access to those facilities, and it just grew from there. We had a built-in market because, of course, Lake Como was already well established and very popular. There weren't very many nudist clubs in Florida at that time, and so we had the whole Central Florida area and the East Coast area. A lot of nudists who had to drive all the way across the state to get to the West Coast.
Mm-hmm.
And we were just the right place. So we were pretty successful right out of the right out of the box.
As you expanded and put in permanent homes in that, can you tell a little bit about that?
Yeah. Part of my dad's vision that came along pretty early was that he wanted to offer first-rate facilities. I hesitate to say, better than other clubs, but he had a different vision in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Lake Como and Sunny Rest in Pennsylvania, and had probably at least one or two others, had already sort of set the idea that people were needed, besides camping, that,
Mm-hmm.
that some of these places offered some rooms, offered food service that was in some cases a little bit more than a snack bar, and they were well patronized. They were good, successful clubs, and in
Mm-hmm.
fact those two are still going and very successful.
Right.
But the early business model for nudism was give people all of this at the lowest possible price. Nudism was basically touted as the least expensive thing you could do with your family
Mm-hmm.
on weekends and vacations. And my dad thought that really wasn't the model he wanted to go for.
Mm-hmm.
So when he really started kind of going to the next step as far as putting in even the early the mobile homes, the
Mm-hmm.
purpose-bought mobile homes that we bought to create a sort of hotel motel type operation, people, and then of course had to charge a fair, what at that time seemed to be a fairly high price to justify that. And some other people in the business were saying, nudists aren't going to pay that. And my dad, his whole concept was built around the idea, his response to that challenge was, nudists are not cheap. To date, they only have low-priced alternatives. And they, like anybody else, are looking for first-class facilities and are willing to pay for them.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the model that he used. And his vision, his courage in going in that direction obviously paid off. And I believe was the inspiration for a number of large and successful, well-known clubs around the country that have gone to the next step and become much more resort-like.
Your mom was very involved as this was going on. Do you have any things that were specific things where she was involved in?
She, of course, was always central.
Mm-hmm.
Each of us coming up through the years, I was in high school when we opened the club in 1964, and then it wasn't until the early 70s that I was living here and really became committed to the fact that yes, this is what I want to do
Mm-hmm.
the rest of my life. And each of the three of us were equal partners, but we each had different roles.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad was the mover, and he had the vision. But we all made decisions. My mom was much more social and in the background. She
Mm-hmm.
was, of course, very important to the operation of the
Right.
club. I was more of the operations guy. I was out there doing maintenance and, and everything in the earlier days. But we all got together and discussed everything and made decisions together.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any other things to talk about the club that you might want to bring up right now?
No.
Like maybe when the condos decided to put, or the
Oh,
buildings
well,
there?
yeah. I referred to the mobile homes that we used
Mhm.
early on, and they were, by and large, especially most of them were two-bedroom mobile homes, roughly 12 by 50
Mm-hmm.
in size. They were wonderful places to vacation because you had, 2 bedrooms, you had a full kitchen, bath, all that sort of thing. But they were very inefficient as far as use of space.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did establish built the first of our hotel buildings
Mhm.
in 1988, I'm pretty sure it was. And the concept at that time was to, we knew a number that we wanted to go
Mhm.
for. And part of it was you had to have a certain number of rooms in order to get a hotel liquor license. And also going to 84 rooms that were replacing 31 rental units. So it was a much better return
Right.
on the space at least.
Mhm.
So the first building was well received. A year later we built 3 more buildings.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, my father passed in 1992, and fortunately for me, we really already had let's say a long-term, some years into the future,
Mm-hmm.
a plan
Mhm.
of several years, and that included, of course, he was still around for the opening of the new restaurant. That was to him even more than building the hotel. That was just sort of a crowning achievement. And opening that allowed us to, of course, vacate what was the restaurant
Mhm.
and build, renovate that into the office it now is. Build the last hotel building. Then eventually, of course, we wound up building the new Cheeks Pool Bar because the old one was very successful, but as long as the weather was good.
Right.
and the weather isn't always good, even in Florida. So,
Right.
So that turned out to be a good idea. That was really the first project that was my project.
Uh-huh.
The other things to that point, even though a lot happened after my dad passed, it was all part of the plan that was already in place.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've just gone from there.
Well, what do you see the future of Cypress Cove? Where do you think we're going now? Do you have any thoughts or comments you'd like to make?
It's always kind of difficult to say, what will the future bring. We don't really know.
Or what would you like it to be?
Well, we're built out as far as usable space.
Mhm.
We between wetlands and all other already developed properties, there is nowhere to go physically. So I really don't imagine replacing a lot of what we have with something, the latest and greatest fad or
Mhm.
something like that. We have a little bit of space. We could add a couple of things, but that nothing is really, in the crosshairs right now. Basically, our idea is just to keep up the standards, to
Mhm.
keep developing the business, offering the facilities, the entertainment, everything that people are coming for. I don't really see that changing that much.
Very good. Maybe change shoes a little bit.
Mhm.
That you've been involved in nudism all your life.
Right.
And I talked a little bit about your life with nudism, maybe in the park, outside the park, some of the organizations you've worked with,
Right.
and that sort of thing.
Right. Well, of course, with my dad's involvement, going to conventions and things back when I was a child, I was peripherally aware of ASA and some of the things that were going on. I knew a lot of the classic old characters that a lot of pictured in a lot of these books and magazines, and but only because I was just there.
Mm-hmm.
But my parents' attitudes toward nudism and everything were, of course, they discussed, and I was present and aware of,
Right.
of their feelings about things. My dad, even way into my own involvement with the club, my dad was the political guy. He was
Mhm.
the president of ASA
Right.
2 different times, and went to vacations or went to conventions and things like that. And of course, when he died, I realized somebody needed to step in and do that. So
Right.
that was the beginning of my own. Well, initially, however, because I was to some degree felt a little perhaps overwhelmed is too strong a word, but it's getting there.
Mhm.
With that, I had been involved in the operation for years, and with my dad's illness, I had been running the place for some time, but suddenly he wasn't there as a backstop anymore.
Right.
And so I persuaded Barbara, my wife, to basically run for a position within the Florida region.
Mhm.
And then she was later an Anna trustee, and my initial involvement, real involvement as an official representative, started with the INF,
Uh-huh.
and that was we were hosting, had already been scheduled to host the INF's 2002 meeting,
Mhm.
and we decided to go to Germany for their year 2000 meeting, and just to kind of refresh ourselves on how such
Yeah.
events were conducted.
Mhm.
And I just told the ANR officials that I'm going, and I'm going to be there anyway. If you want me to represent ANR, I will. And they said, okay, fine. So for the next 10 or 12 years, I represented ANR with INF. And even Barbara was involved. We wound up on the INF board. So we had for quite a few years, we were involved with them quite a bit.
Mhm.
And then, of course, some years ago, I did run and served 6 years as an ANR trustee.
Mhm.
And by that time that my term expired, I was kind of ready to just step back. We
Mhm.
were no longer, we sort of stepped back from the INF involvement, and I figured, well, I was now thoroughly part of the old guard in ANR, and I thought it's best just to step back and let hopefully some new blood
Mhm.
take over, and I would just enjoy my retirement years.
Of your time, with working with ANR and INF and that, do you have any specifically interesting things that may have happened that you might want to bring up?
Let's see. Well, traveling, because of our involvement, for almost 25 years, making every ANR convention,
Mhm.
and of course, the regional conventions, or our own regional convention, that took me to a lot of clubs that
Mhm.
I wouldn't have normally gotten to, and I've always enjoyed that. Getting involved internationally was fascinating because we visited several fairly large, and in fact, in a couple of cases, very large European nudist resorts.
Mhm.
So interesting experiencing their operations.
Mhm.
In many ways so similar to our own, but with their own particular slant and character. So we've enjoyed all of that. Going through the years, as I mentioned earlier, some of the characters, Saul Stern, Forrest Emerson, just interesting people. It was kind of fun to be around,
Mhm.
and so it's hard to pick out particular episodes to say they're my favorites, but
Yeah.
but I've really enjoyed my life as a nudist, and and in Cypress Cove, Anner, and elsewhere.
I feel very happy that you have it because I love it here. That 1975, your mom and dad decided to do a major step, as far as we're concerned, is when they started the library.
Right.
And there was two other people that donated many of the books, and I should have written down, but I don't remember their names.
Reed and Jane Schuster.
Reed and Jane Schuster. I know it started out in a small room
Yeah.
and gradually grew. Can you give us sort of a little bit of what you saw and how it grew,
Yeah.
and maybe some about the people?
Right. What is now the office, or actually that building sort of grew in phases itself, but in the original structure, my folks had included 3 10-by-10 rooms for sleeping, for spending the night.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the 70s, as we were getting into people going into the mobile homes, the rooms were just surplus. And so we had combined 2 of them, taking out the internal wall, to that point for another use, which had gone by the wayside. So when my father, having been a nudist writer, photographer, actually both my parents were, I think generally they would have acknowledged that although they both were pretty good with the camera and wrote a lot of articles, my dad was the better photographer, my mother was the better writer. And at one time they actually were editors of Suntan, which was I'm sure you've got some copies of that here. So they had that connection to nudist journalism.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Reed Schuster was a long-time contributor to nudist magazines, and of course by that time they had moved here and owned a home, and so they got together with my folks and they talked about the fact that there ought to be some sort of collection, and the decision was made to use the 10-by-20 space
Mm-hmm.
as the library.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it pretty quickly filled up. And they each had pretty extensive collections, boxes, stacks of nudist magazines that were the initial seed for the library. And at that time, once the word got out, there were people all over the country who had it piled up in closets and garages, had boxes and things of cartons of nudist magazines that they didn't want to throw away, just didn't know what to do with, and they were so happy to have some place that could give them good homes. And that was the big thing that really stocked the library.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, in a sense, that continues. People are constantly contributing things.
Yeah.
So that's how it got on. In those early days, as is still the case to some degree, finding people to actually be there and have it open to the nudist public has always been a bit of a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
But it's always worked one way or another.
Do you have any comments or thoughts about some of the key people of the library that you may have worked with?
Well, probably, besides those original founders, one of the earliest really, really important leaders of the library was T. Latimer. Of course, he had formerly owned a nudist club in California, retired here with his wife Leela, and he just wanted something to do. He became president of the library, and his strength was that he was kind of a pusher, a go-getter. And I know there's still some plaques on the wall with names on them and things where people had contributed $100 or whatever it was for whatever drive. He did 2 or 3 of those sorts of drives, raising a lot of money so the library could build shelves, buy furniture, that sort of thing. And he was the president of the library for a number of years, and really was probably very responsible for a good bit of its early success. Others, other officers, presidents, and everything have each brought their own strengths and character to the library, but just we're fortunate that there's always been somebody that has been willing to come forward and put forth the time and effort that necessary to keep it going. Volunteers to leadership to whatever.
That library outgrew itself
Right.
at the office, and you built the first part of the building.
Right. We built half of this building to start with,
And
thinking, well, that was as big as we could ever need. and of course, we all know that didn't last. We actually doubled the size of the building a few years later.
and we're pushing at the seams again.
Yes. Okay. It's easy to see. There's, books and magazines everywhere you look.
We've got a tremendous collection. As we've grown in that, do you see challenges for the library or anything that you might?
Well, making it available has always been, the big challenge. Whether as simple as finding enough people to have it open a few days a week for a few hours. Obviously, as a real resource, it needs to be available beyond that, and the library has always been friendly to research inquiries and things like that. I know that a lot of things have been digitized. I look forward to the day that we can, you can say that everything that is in the library or comes in is converted to some sort of digital form.
And we have all the U.S. Magazines digitized now. They're working
Yeah.
on the foreign. We still got a lot of weeks and months of work to get done with the digitization.
Yeah.
And then there's discussion which has been going on for a number of years. How do we advance the library using the digitization? What
Right.
can we do legally, and what can we
Right.
have to, this sort of thing?
Well,
Any comments on that?
Well, I'm no expert on copyright law and things like that, but I'm sure there are some things that the library has to be careful about making available, or at least trying to charge any kind of a fee for
Yeah.
people having access. On the other hand, so many of those publications are so far out of copyright that that may be some opportunity.
Unfortunately, a lot of the pictures copyrights have been renewed.
Okay.
So you got to be real careful on that.
Right. You do have to know what you're doing.
Yes, and there's a lot of thought and work on that. Do you have any other comments about the library that you would like to put out?
No, I just it remains fairly unique. A couple of two or three other regions within Anner have their own regional libraries now, and I've not had the opportunity to actually physically visit any of them. I don't think that any of them are of nearly the scale of
They're
this
not.
one.
And we're actually working with them and trying to work towards sharing some of our duplicate stuff, and down the road possibly some of our digital material we can share.
Well, in the INF, I don't even know if they still have a library now. I know they did for a number of years, but it was very. You'd think for an old and as large an organization it is, there would be more there, but it was basically a pile of periodicals in boxes in a back room of somebody's house.
I did not realize that.
Yeah, and so it was a matter if anybody wanted to get access to it, they had to somehow get in touch with the guy that was in possession. I won't say he didn't own it. I don't think he ever considered that he owned it, but it just was the custodian, and they had to, because it was very informal. So anybody that wanted to see this stuff had to get in touch with him, get to where he lived, make arrangements at his convenience to get access to the boxes, and then start digging through them. So it wasn't much of a library.
Yeah. Well, the naturists right now are trying to start building a library.
Yeah.
It's in the box stage right now.
Yeah.
They're just in the early stages. Do you have any other things that you might like to tell our viewers, because this is going both to Anner
Mm-hmm.
and for their archives and for the library,
Right.
that would be good to put on.
Well, the is I don't know what to say. As far as Cypress Cove goes, as we all know, that we are now into our third generation of leadership. My son Ted, who's currently running the Cove, has 4 kids, and at this point, they're all young enough that no one has any idea whether any one or more of them might be interested in continuing into a 4th generation of leadership. And it's going to be primarily up to Ted
Mm-hmm.
as to what happens, and if they don't, how to I think, like me and his grandfather, is that we would really hope that some sort of plan can be made so that the Cove continues much as it is.
Mm-hmm.
And if none of his kids want to run the place, then it's going to take a lot of thought as to how to make that happen when we are no longer either around or interested in
Right.
anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So that's Cypress Cove. We basically we intend to just keep on going for as long as we possibly can, keeping it nice, improving incrementally at least, and maintaining what we
Mm-hmm.
have. Anner and other organizations that face their own challenges, because nudism is the big push had been to make nudism mainstream so that it kind of becomes a matter of fact, that people don't, that the opposition goes away and people become so mainstream that nobody would think about saying, well, you can't do that anymore.
Right.
It's been partially successful, successful enough at least that it's actually created a bit of a problem because nudists themselves are complacent. And so the organizations, which their primary purpose is to help protect nudism,
Mm-hmm.
and most of what I call the rank and file, aren't of the opinion that that's necessary. But
It is.
we still believe it is. So
Yeah.
that's a challenge for not only Anner, but the Naturist Society and others.
Yeah, the government affairs, which I keep telling people is extremely important.
Yeah.
And whenever I've talked to somebody, you really need to belong because we could lose the capability of being nudists.
Yeah,
And so many people don't realize
they
it.
just they have a hard time believing that it's possible.
Right.
But it is.
Yeah.
There are ways to, without even passing direct laws saying you can't be nude in a nudist facility.
Mm-hmm.
There are ways of chipping away at the edges so that it becomes you can make it less desirable to do so.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there are still dangers.
Do you have any other things you'd like to say today?
I don't think so. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share, and I've enjoyed it.
Well, thank you very much for coming and doing this with us. I think all our people that are watching can enjoy it.
Yeah.
And you have yourself a good day. I want to mention, I don't think I did, Bob Proctor is one of our technical people, and Terry Crump is our other one that's doing the filling.
Right.
So thank you very much.
I thank you, and thank you guys.